Now today's topic at hand is Momonosuke, and basically I'm going to be talking about what I think will happen in the next coming couple of chapters, because I think we are really at a point where things are moving towards the imminent battle against Kaido and his crew. We see that most of the infiltration force is already present, as well as Jinbei and Robin, Law and Neko and Marco aren't too far off either. They seem to be very close, and Luffy and Yamato should be very close as well, given that Yamato knows where the execution platform is anyways. So you have all these prominent figures of all the alliance all arriving at the same place very soon, which should be where Momonosuke is about to be executed. So I feel like we're reaching a point to where there's going to be some sort of climax, whereas there's going to be a catalyst that sets off this war. I think that catalyst could be Momo, and I think him having a huge moment is so warranted at this point, because Momo is someone that I think has to prove himself. So I think here Momo offsetting Conquerors Haki could be the big moment, especially in a setting like this, because Conquerors has a bigger effect when there's a lot of people, and not just in terms of people getting knocked out, but also the impression people are going to have for Momo moving forward. Think back to Fishman Island, think back to Marineford with Luffy saving Ace. Even though fathers were knocked out for the most part and it didn't really affect the war in the grand scheme of things apart from saving Ace, I think more of the highlight was more on the impression of Luffy's potential. The admirals were wary of him after that, most of the Marines were shaken up, and even the legendary Whitebeard himself started to take Luffy a lot more seriously. So I think this setting is perfect for Momonosuke to show that potential that he's never shown before. I think this moment right here was building up for Momo for a while now. Now granted, I do think that Momonosuke is still going to get saved at the end of the day, but him showing Conquerors is going to be amazing. But before that, let's just go through the moments that ties all this together and key details all the left behind that could be foreshadowing of this happening. Now one of the more interesting things about Momonosuke is that he is obviously not Odin. This has been told to us time and time again that Odin was just a different breed, whereas Odin, even as a young boy, had his name mentioned all around Wano, and even Momo himself recognizes this. And with Momo, he is almost the opposite, whereas he's scared, I guess you could say he is cowardly and not powerful enough to fend for himself, which of course is justified because Momo is still 8 years old. But again, in comparison to Odin, he is very tame, and of course because of this, people don't really like Momo. But people have to remember that Momo was a kid in a noble family with great upbringing up until the stuff with Kaido, and from then on, being the heir to the Kozuki clan, this massive burden of being the leading figure to fulfill the prophecy of opening the borders of Wano and defeating Kaido and Orochi was sort of passed on to him as an 8-year-old. And of course with Momo, it was very obvious that he couldn't shoulder this much weight on his own, and this even goes back to what Kaido said to Momo 20 years ago, him having the conviction or will that someone else put on him. And this is also sort of the beginning of Momo's rise to sort of become better, and we see more of this in Zou, in which Momo truly wants to achieve this ambition of his parents. He knows what role to play, but he doesn't have the power to do so, in which he begs Luffy to help him defeat Kaido, which was something that we've never seen from Momo previously. Even though Momo came off as this entitled brat earlier on, who seemingly was waiting on something to happen without actually making progress himself, and even Luffy checks him on this. He tells Momo that, are you fine with just being a figurehead in all of this? Being the general and commander over these mighty samurai, is that all you can do? And when Momo was confronted by these questions, he knew he had to act. He realized that this was a lot more than just having the fighting force. Having the fighting power was just one part of him taking on the mantle as the leader of the samurai and the head of the Kozuki. And we see more of this during the events of Udon. When all the samurais bowed, Momo notices that what the samurai saw wasn't Momo himself, but rather the lingering legacy left by Odin, and that this dream of fulfilling the ambition of his parents was a lot more than just battle. Momo knew that he needed conviction, the will, and courage to sort of meet the expectation that the samurais were seeing in him. And not only just because he was Odin's son, but also because he is someone that will eventually lead Wano moving forward. Momo has to prove that he is worthy of taking on the mantle of Shogun of Wano. And what better way is there with Momo proving his worth with awakening Conquerors Haki during the execution? And I feel like there's been some sort of build up to this, right? And this goes to his initial conversation with Luffy when he got captured by Kanjuro. And of course, this shows growth on Momo's part because he is trying to grow and overcome these internal problems that he has. And here he says that the Alliance shouldn't worry about him and that he would figure out a way out on his own, even though in reality he was actually scared. But that shows growth on his part, whereas even though he feels a certain way, he acts in a way that he wants to be. And here Luffy tells him that all he needs to do is find a way to survive and that he was going to save him. And Luffy even states that by Momo's standard, he's acting a lot more manly now. And from here on out, we saw that Momo has been looking for ways to survive, even going as far as to escape Kanjuro by cutting the ropes. Granted, we saw how that turned out with him getting beat to a pulp, but regardless, Momo tried knowing what would happen if he failed. Momo is then brought to Kaido and Orochi, the stronghold of the opposition, and at this point, Momo remembers Luffy's words again: find a way to survive and we'll go and rescue you. And at this point, he really hasn't kept up with his part so far. Granted, he's still alive, but he still hasn't made any actions in terms of surviving before Luffy comes. It's more so of him just waiting for his imminent doom. And I feel like at this point, Momo has been driven to the point of desperation. He was beaten to a pulp. He is currently in the hands of the enemy. He feels like he hasn't done anything of worth given that everything he tried has failed and is seemingly just waiting to be executed. And is also then reminded by Kaido about how much of a failure he is, with Kaido saying that he looks just as disappointing as he did 20 years ago and is also someone that is unbefitting of his own name. And so with Momonosuke, he is getting bashed from all angles. So much is building within him right now. And I usually go back to what Hyogoro said back in Udon, and this can also apply to Haki with Rayleigh's statement as well. And basically he says that only when backed into a corner will one's true power bloom. And given that Momo has no options left, he is currently on the execution platform without any ways of escaping by himself. I think this is where all that buildup is unleashed as a wave of conquerors. And this should easily remind you of Doflamingo's awakening of conquerors, whereas before he was shot by arrows and almost lynched by the crowd, all his emotions just sort of bubbled up and came out as a wave of conquerors which knocked out everybody. And we've seen that a lot of characters who awaken conquerors for the first time have used it in desperation, whether they wanted to save someone or themselves. It happened with Ace, Doflamingo, and Luffy in Marineford. I think the same thing is going to play out here for Momo as well in the same fashion, with Momo just about to be executed, in which he then releases or awakens Conquerors Haki at that moment, which would then give Luffy time to save him since Luffy was the person that said he was going to do it, and in that way he's technically fulfilled his promise of surviving. And again, given that all the samurais are watching, this is somewhat of Momo's coming of age, whereas they will know that Momo is worthy of leading the samurai. And I think it would be even more impactful on Kaido because Kaido was so impacted by Oden. So seeing his son use conquerors might change Kaido's initial opinion about Momo. But overall, I think this would be a great moment if it happened, especially for Momo's character. Now, in terms of whether Momo has conquerors or not, I think that's a no-brainer because lineage in One Piece is very huge. And from what we know so far about conquerors is that it's not an ability that you can train for, but more so one that you were born with. And it seems like it's an ability that is passed down. We know Oden had conquerors but never used it. We never actually saw it on screen, but I think it's safe to say that Momo most likely inherited Conquerors Haki from Oden. And even before that, we knew Momo was special in a lot of different ways because he has the voice of all things as well, which he was capable of using to control or to command Zunisha back in Zou. So we knew Momo was special ever since then. So I would not be surprised if Momo has Conquerors Haki. I feel like he has to just because of how the story goes about some of these things. But again, even though Momo is only a child and in most cases hasn't really done anything as of right now, I feel like him using Conquerors Haki will be a turning point for him as a character. I feel like there's a lot of setups for Momo moving forward, and that he has a very significant role in all of this. And we also have to remember why Momo has the same dragon fruit as Kaido. Obviously Momo's being artificial, but I feel like there has to be some reason for this. I don't feel like Oda would set this up ever since Punk Hazard for it to have no sort of conclusion. I think there might be more there. And also with the reveal of Yamato being influenced by Oden, Oda might do something of sorts between Momo and Kaido. But again, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Comment down below what you guys think. Do you guys think that Momo could awaken Conquerors Haki in the next couple of chapters, or do you think something else happens? Like the video if you liked it. Follow me on Twitter at FerrisSpace. Subscribe for for more One Piece content on this channel. It is Pharaoh, and I will see you folks later. Peace.